Welcome to Vermont Artists and Authors, where we interview great storytellers and artists from the amazing Green Mountain State. This is episode 15. I'm your host, Barney Smith of StoryComic.com, and we're excited to have with us the acclaimed and celebrated Vermont author, Ray Perkins. Ray, thanks for joining us on this lovely Thursday afternoon or evening.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you say, you started off of you're a retired school teacher.
Yeah, social studies.
Social studies. Okay.
Yeah, and middle school social studies. Have to be a little wacky to teach that age group, but hey, it worked.
Yeah, exactly. Did you jump right into writing right after you retired, or were you writing a little bit before you retired?
I was actually writing right off from college, and when I took this great Vermont history course with Senator Graham Newell, who was at Linden State College, professor there, and he just got me so excited about Vermont history. When I had my first teaching assignment, which was in Coventry, it was requested that teachers sit down and write with the students. Okay. So I penned this short mystery, and that's where it started.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
If anybody's interested, definitely go check out Ray's website. It's called Mystery for Me, the number 4, mysteryforme.com.
Correct.
And you have on there a book of 3, the BT and Jimmy Adventure series. I got to say, I am fascinated by the BT and Jimmy Adventure series. There's it's kind of a throwback to a nostalgia of like the child detective series that you would remember, but also, as you said in there, it also has some life lessons involved in there. There's you throw in a little bit of some history for people, so whether they like it or not, they're going to be learning as it goes. So talk to us a bit about how you kind of got into writing, the inspiration behind Book 1, for instance, The Mystery of the Silver Statue.
Well, like I said, the inspiration initially was Professor Graham Newell. And as I was writing, when I first started teaching, writing along with my students, they asked her, if I would read my story. Okay. And so I read this short story. I mean, it was just a couple of pages, and they just loved it. And they said, "Oh my God, we got to hear more." And so from then on, I just continued to write a little bit year after year. I moved from Coventry that first half year I was there, and took a full-time job at Barton Academy in graded school. Mm-hmm. And I was teaching middle school history, and 6th graders I was teaching Vermont history.
Okay.
And so every year when we got to the point where we were talking about the French and Indian War and the lost silver statue, I would go back to my book, and it would inspire me to write some more. Okay. Well, when I got done the manuscript, or thought I was done, and started sending it out, I got this reply from an editor who said, "Thanks, but no thanks. Here's a thought. What's going to make your book different than others out there sitting on the shelf?" Right. And so that's when it kind of hit me that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my 2 oldest sons as inspiration. And so my older son became BT, and the younger one, Jimmy. And my older son actually had a brain tumor at 5 years old. I guess I decided that the French and Indian War was very interesting at that point. And so I could come up with an idea for a mystery. When Graham Newell talked about this statue, this missing statue of French and Indian War period, I thought, there's a story there. And so I started doing more research and learning about the Native Americans across the border in Quebec at Odanak, and then used that research to include it in the book. And so, being a teacher, I had to include the history aspects, and so I really enjoyed that part as well, as mysteries. However, I think I was being interviewed by someone at the Chronicle in Barton, and afterwards she said, "You know what? You write history mysteries. That's what you write." Like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so how much, because as you said, as a teacher, and you want to add some of the historical significance to stuff, do you find that easier or more challenging as a writer? Because kind of paints you into a point of, I can't lie about this, or I can't fictionalize some of these events.
Well, that can be a little tricky, because in my second book, Mystery of the Brick Kingdom, Kingdom is actually an industrial area in Barton, and I could see it from my classroom on the 4th floor. And that's where Barton was kind of well noted back in the 1800s for their industry. And the industry was along the river, which flowed from Crystal Lake down into the Barton River. And many businesses grew up along there and used the water power from the falls to power their businesses. So I kind of thought there might be a story there. So after the silver statue, I did some more research on the Brick Kingdom, and it still exists to some extent in that there are lots of brick buildings in there. Most of them have fallen down, but it was kind of it's a cool place to write about. And also just above that is a lumber business. It used to be a grain business. It's called E.M. Brown Incorporated, and it's very unusual because where the water flows along the falls, there was a sluice was built so the water would flow right into this E.M. Brown building and power all of their equipment. And so I got to see all of this stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, this is really cool. I know there's a mystery here. So the hard part was figuring out what that mystery was, because it's usually about buried treasure.
Right.
Mark Twain, one of his quotes that I really like is that at some point in every kid's life, they've got to go out searching for buried treasure. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And, I remember way back when I was a kid, my grandfather saying, yeah, during the Depression, my father buried jars of money out in the yard. I think it was under that maple tree over there. So my brothers and I hustled out there and we dug up the yard. My grandfather laughed and laughed. We found nothing. But we hunted for buried treasure, and so that was sort of an inspiration as well.
Right. And so I noticed too is like that, this came out, your second book in the series came out in 2012. The first one was in 2011. But the third one came out in 2017. So there was like a 5-year lag there.
What happened was in 2011, I retired from the classroom at that point. And we took a jaunt south to Florida and spent part of the year down there. And at Disney World, I started writing about a mystery at the Pirates of the Caribbean. And so I got back up here, and my daughter-in-law, who does the illustrations for the book, said, no, this is not cool. Your books are all about the Northeast Kingdom. I said, yeah, okay. That's what I need to do. Right. So I changed. I just totally gutted the story and changed it not completely, but quite a bit. And so the third book now is going to be the fourth book, because
okay.
The book coming out this fall or this next winter is going to be called The Mystery of the Mountaintop Treasure. Which is around Jay Peak, and also Space Research Facility, which is still up there, and it bordered the United States and Canada. It was an unusual business. They made huge guns that would fire 40 or 50 mile missiles, and so it was a very intriguing area. So anyway, I put that aside, and when we moved back here, I was in Derby Line, and one day the local paper, the Newport Daily, had this article about a group of investigators who were coming to Derby Line. They were called the Paranormal Investigators of New England. And they were headed to the Haskell Library and Opera House. Okay. Which is an unusual story in itself, because it sits right on an international border. Half of it's in the United States, half of it in Canada. And actually in the theater, there's a line that marks the demarcation of here. If you sit on this side, you're in Canada. If you sit on this side watching whatever performance, you were in the United States. And so when I saw that article, I said to my youngest son, I said, Nick, grab your camera. And I grabbed my notebook. I said, we're going to the Haskell. So we raced up to the Haskell, and we got there, and the investigators were just setting up. And so they went through all this stuff. They said, there's been lots of stories about strange happenings at the Haskell. And I'm like, oh, there's a mystery here. So I began to write the mystery of the haunted opera house.
Okay.
And that's where that came in. And so I set aside the Mountaintop Treasure. Okay. And so that's why that period of time is kind of like I was going every which way, not sure what I was going to write or what I was going to finish. So I actually finished the the haunted opera house and got that published.
And so are each one of these stories, is there a continuing meta plot, or each one of these stories is kind of contained in its own beginning, middle, end?
Each one can be contained. However, the characters are all the same. Okay. And in fact, in the second one, they introduce a couple of friends in the story, and they all continue through the next books in the series as well.
Okay.
But the general themes are mysteries and histories, and the whole idea of this young man who had a very difficult time growing up, and just feelings of inadequacy, and how he really had to persevere to get to the point where he went to college, he became a computer techie, and did some great things.
Right.
And so the book kind of follows along
that way,
along those lines. Yeah, perseverance.
Is the BT and Jimmy adventure series, or is there a timelessness about it, or does it take place in a certain time period itself?
I would say it's pretty timeless.
Okay.
Yeah, they harken back to the stories I read when I was a kid, the mysteries.
Right, like the Hardy Boys and the
Hardy Boys
and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have an idea of like you want to just keep writing the series until it ends, or is there going to be like I'm going to do 10 or I'm going to do 5, or do you have?
I don't have any specific number, but I always have these thoughts just rolling around in my brain, like, oh yeah, I know the next one is going to be the mystery of the Men from Magog monster.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Because I've always been intrigued about Lake Men from Magog, and I thought I saw something way back when I was in college, and I'm like, yeah, there's definitely a mystery there.
Is there like any theme, like for instance, maybe doing like one book per town in the Northeast Kingdom or anything like that?
I haven't really thought about that, but I've been to different schools. Like I was down in Barnett, and the kids were like, oh, I know what you could write about down here. So yeah. I was at a library group in Barton, and I think the Haunted Opera House was just coming out, and like I had people saying, "Oh, you've got to write about all these stories about these haunted places and these haunted houses." And
right, hide money. So, oh yeah, you're right. Every town's got an adventure. I mean, you're onto something here, Ray. I bet you can. Yeah. When you sit down to write, there's like what they call them, plotters and pantsers, where you either you have a very specific thing. Are you in charge of the story, or is it BT and Jimmy? Do you write in like, and are you, as you're typing it out or writing, like, I guess they're going here, like, how does that work for you?
That's a great question, and I think I've evolved over time.
Yeah.
Early on, like with the silver statue and with the Brick Kingdom and the Haunted Opera House, it was all, the story just took me. In these first 3 books, actually in the 4, the story just took me.
Okay.
Yeah, in the Brick Kingdom, I was sitting there and I was just totally stuck. I'm like, I don't know how to I know where I want to go, but I'm not sure how to get from here to there. And so I was sitting there one day, morning after breakfast at the bar, and I just was thinking about it. I put it away for a couple of weeks, and I came back to it, and I'm like, I jumped up, like, I got it. And my daughter's like, what is your problem? I got it. I got from here to there. And so, it came to me, and that's what the books have done, other than the new book that I just released last year, and that's an adult thriller.
Right.
And that was very different for me because, one, it was an adult story, and two, I had taken an online course from James Patterson, who is obviously, he's the guru of mysteries and thrillers. Right. And one thing hit home to me, which was, he said, you should just kind of outline each chapter. And I did. And I outlined 80 some odd chapters. Wow. And it took me from where I wanted to start to where I wanted to end.
Yeah. So talk to us a bit about your latest book. This book here, Spy Chip Armageddon, and it's one of your biggest books, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. And it's an adult thriller. It's nearly 400 pages. And I was just surfing the internet, and I came across this interesting article on what's called a RFID, which is a radio frequency identification device. And so it's a chip, and you've probably heard of them now. People are implanting them actually in their hands, between the thumb and the first finger. Okay. And they can be read by a reader. Huh. So there are companies out there who are actually using them, implanting them in their employees so that they can get into the building, so that they can go to the snack machine and just wave their hand over it. And it's just, this intrigued me. I said, oh, wow, this is crazy. And then I started doing some research. Some of the research was very biblical. Right. Saying, oh, this is the mark of the devil. This is where we're going in society. That kind of gave me the impetus to write about this story. And
wow, so this takes place in the Northeast Kingdom too?
Well, from Washington, D.C., the Burlington area, to Washington, D.C., to Puerto Rico, to California, and to an island off the coast of Alaska. Wow. So it's kind of like spread out all over the place.
So I get, is there any Easter eggs or any things in the background of this story at all that would make a reference to your BT and Jimmy series?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah. There are references all over. For sure. And family members and people saying, "That's me. You're talking about me there."
Is this part of the same world as the BT and Jimmy series at all? No, it's completely separate.
Completely separate. When I pulled from characters, I pulled from characters close to me, and then characters that I just made up in my mind because I said, I need this character, and I really don't know them, but I'm going to create them.
When you have something set up and you have it written out, who's your proofreaders? Do you have who do you hand it over to say, hey, can you check this out?
First, I start with my wife, Mary. She is still a teacher, and she's taught everything from English to special ed. And so she's pretty good at that kind of stuff.
Right.
And, definitely from the very raw beginnings, she can look at things and say, oh, what's going on here? But also my daughter-in-law, Stephanie, who does the illustrations, she'll get it read off and then come back with her thoughts on things from, really from every chapter. Right. And then we'll sit down and with the kids' books, Steph and I will sit down and decide what the pictures are going to be inside.
And so she helps. She helps design the cover for your books. And everything.
She actually she has so much inspiration for seeing those kind of things that I don't even necessarily see. And I don't even see the cover. I mean, I don't say this is what I want on the cover. She reads it, and then from there she starts with ideas, and then she sends me them and says, "What do you think?" Right. I'm always blown away. Like, oh my God, this is so cool.
So in your series, in your series, do you have anything that basically like rules of physics or something that fits specifically in your writing? Is it like Scooby-Doo in the sense where there's always an explanation, or do you have things that have?
Sometimes there isn't. In the Haunted
Okay.
Opera House, there really isn't an explanation.
Okay.
Now, two very different things happen.
Okay.
And there is buried treasure, but there's also that haunted aspect.
Right.
And that never gets resolved.
Do you at that point, do you have like a folders or whatever, an explanation that you know? Do you kind of lay out some breadcrumbs for folks at all?
Yeah, actually, pretty much at the end of each book, I kind of give them a taste of what the next book's going to be like.
Okay.
Yeah, and in my first one, I wasn't sure where I was going with that, but I did leave the door open because I say at the very end, mysterious notes shoved under the door for BT, and then it ends.
Oh, okay.
So the note, then I pick up with the Brick Kingdom.
Okay.
And that's what the note was all about.
Right.
Yeah, one kind of leads to the next
right.
mystery.
So when you write your drafts, how many drafts does it take before you're saying, all right, this is good,
Oh,
I'm going to get this?
I do quite a bit of speaking at schools.
Right.
And one, because a lot of teachers know me in the area, and they love to have me in, and the kids do too. So kids are often asking about that, and if they don't, I will tell them, you know what, I go over my books probably anywhere from 20 to 25 times that I'm going through this thing and rewriting parts of it.
Have you ever had been a point where you like really liked a scene or really liked like what happened, but it didn't go anywhere? It wasn't part of the larger plot. Did you ever have to like pull those out and maybe just like add them into a different book or keep it to the side and say, I'm going to try to find a way to use this later?
Oh, definitely. And I do have a proofreader, editor, and send it out. And then when I get it back, it's like, I'm just so full of ideas from the proofreader and editor.
Right.
What are you thinking here? This doesn't, you don't think this works, do you? Maybe it'll work somewhere else. So yeah, that really gets me thinking.
What are some of the things you wished you knew that you know now that you wish you knew when you're writing your first book?
I wish that I had known how difficult it would be to market it. Because the first publisher was kind of new, and I was growing up with them, and there wasn't a great amount of marketing, but I thought I could do it better myself, and so I decided that I was just going to go it on my own, and I was going to self-publish, and it was still just as difficult.
Would you recommend for someone who is looking to get their book published to either self-publish it or look for a publisher? I
really like self-publishing because I am in control.
So as you mentioned before, you were going to have, your book 4 is coming out.
Mm-hmm.
You said this fall, correct?
I'm hoping by Christmas time.
Okay.
The Mystery of the Mountaintop Treasure.
And is the Spy Chip Armageddon, is there going to be a sequel to that? Or
I've started it.
Okay.
I have, yes. Yeah. Okay. And so I kind of float back and forth between but I've also, I've jumped into another mystery, BT and Jimmy mystery with the Men from Magog monster. Yeah.
And do you have, and so let's talk a bit too about you also came out in, I think it was in 2012 as well, your that memoir book based off of your father-in-law.
Yes, it was about, I was still teaching, and it was in the summer, and my father-in-law was in his late 80s. I think he was 88 or 89. And I said to my wife, your dad's not going to be around many more years. I've heard all these stories over the years about his experiences. And so I'm going to sit down with him, and I'm going to get his story. And we converse back and forth. I spent some days with him, and And so there's still there are things that to this day that I could probably add, and it was extraordinary to me to imagine this. I think he was 21 years old, and he had been married just a couple of weeks, and he was off to the West Coast, and then on board a ship, which took them like 2,500 soldiers. Took them first to Australia and then up to India, and they crossed India by train. And then he jumped in with another unit, crossed the southern part of the Himalaya mountains, leading pack mules with everything that they needed to surprise the Japanese in the southern jungles of China.
Wow.
Where he saw quite a bit of combat.
And you kind of like wrote this kind of like also as a gift to him as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And he had brought back pictures, but I also researched and found pictures of things that he had talked about, like the USS John Pope, who, the ship that he went over on, and was then my illustrator was able to put it all together. As
a writer, what were some of the significant differences between writing a biography and then writing some fiction prose?
I found it much more difficult to write the biography.
Really?
Yeah, I really did. Okay. Because it was just a different style that it was kind of foreign to me.
Right.
And so, it took me some time quite a bit of reworking to say, to figure out how I was going to say things. That didn't sound, like just a bunch of facts.
Right. Yeah.
Because I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to make it more personal, with some of his thoughts and some of his feelings.
Right.
And what was going on while he was there.
And so, because you came out with that book around the same time, because you came out with like 3 books within like 2 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
The first BT and Jimmy series, and then you came out with the second one and this one both at
the
same time.
Oh, yeah, and I was really gung ho at that point. Once the first book, The Silver Statue, was published, I was so gung ho that it took me years to write The Silver Statue and get it to the point where I was willing to send it to publishers.
Right.
And once it was published, I wrote The Brick Kingdom one summer.
Right.
In just a couple of months.
How is it different to write for children, like for the young adults, as to which one do you see more freeing or more exciting for you as an author?
Definitely writing for kids.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems to flow.
Yeah.
More easily. And I can just take off and go with it, and it just seems to almost write itself.
Right.
Whereas the other one, the adult thriller, there was a much more research to that.
Okay.
Not to say I don't research the BT and Jimmy series, because I do, but being a history teacher, a social studies teacher for 30 years, and teaching Vermont studies, and particularly the Barton area and the area up north here, next to the border, I've got a lot of that foundation,
right?
And then it's just adding to it.
Right.
Whereas with the Spy Ship Armageddon, it was totally, wow, I've got to go out and research all of this stuff, and what I've got to figure out California. Oh yeah, let's take a trip, which was kind of cool.
Are you always going to make sure, at least like in your Spy Ship Armageddon series, there's always going to be a stopover in Vermont?
Oh yes,
something
definitely.
Happened in Vermont.
Yeah, because the main character, Jackson LaPointe, it really is a government employee, and he works out of a service center up in St. Albans.
So this has been great. I'm excited now. I as you're talking, I'm just thinking what I love about, because it's based in Vermont, and my gears are spinning on thinking about all the people that I want to buy your books for right now too. So.
Awesome. Yeah. And the funny part is, I get adults who buy them or buy the books in the series and say, Yeah, but I love them too.
Right.
Because they're good, quick reads, and they're easy reads.
On your website, you can click on it. It'll take us straight to the Amazon site. But
Correct.
do you actually have books? If somebody wanted a book signed by you, is there a way they could do that?
I haven't quite figured that out yet. Other than contacting me, because they came through the website and I can send it.
Right.
Because I have books right here. I can just sign and send.
Okay. All right. So someone could do that too.
Yeah, I have done that.
So the easiest way that somebody to find you would probably be then going to mysteryforme.com, correct?
Either mysteryforme.com, yes, or going to Amazon.
So yeah, definitely for mystery4me.com. You have all your books on there. Your BT and Jimmy Adventure series is on there. Your additional titles, which is their Spy Chip Armageddon, and also the memoir you wrote. You're getting quite the library coming up here, Ray, of books that you have. So
yeah, and hoping to continue that. COVID slowed me down a little bit.
Well, I mean, I'm excited to see 4 and then book 5, and it sounds like you already got some ideas for other books coming out.
Yeah, those ideas just keep churning around and calling to me.
Well, thanks a lot, Ray. It's been a genuine pleasure talking to you, and I'm excited to see more of your work now.
Well, it's great talking to you. Thank you, Barney.
You're welcome. Yeah. So we'll get right into it. And then yeah. Because I know, as a retired teacher, do you still like everything to be right on time and everything like that?
Too? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And I always, all my meals are eaten in like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You got to hit the bathroom and eat. And
Yep.